So a few people asked me about my bumper on my Tundra, and I thought I would make a quick little video about it since I have it off for the work I'm doing. If anyone has a first-gen Tundra, they know that the way these trucks are shaped, the frame is well below the actual line of the body. So the frame is a good, foot below the front of the vehicle. And a normal Tundra, it extends to about here, and then the bumpers are mounted on front. The issue with that mainly is that it makes it really difficult to make a bumper that looks kind of minimalist and high clearance, I guess you could say. What I did to work around that is that I made the main body of the bumper sit above the frame rails. Normally, most of the bumpers, aftermarket bumpers, the main body runs straight across because everything bolts to the front of the frame rails. What I did was I cut off the frame rails and moved them back a few inches, and so they're basically flush with the front of the vehicle. And then I built the main body above the frame rails. So basically this piece here wraps around the front of the frame rails, and then the main body, which is this, sits above the frame rails on top. So you can kind of see here. And what that does is it gives the illusion that the bumper is actually up higher, mounted up higher on the vehicle, but it really isn't. And then to add to that, instead of bringing the wings straight out from the main body, I stepped them upwards and brought them up higher so they would run flush with the body. And then, like I said, I kept this main part of the body very minimalist. Instead of having all this filled in, as well as all this filled in, which is usually how it works on the bumpers, I made it so it looks kind of light. Now, that being said, this bumper is not designed to take massive hits or be a tow point. It's more of just kind of giving me a little bit of protection from the hang down bits, and mounting lights and keeping brush and stuff away. I would not put tow points in this bumper. I'm sorry, recovery points in this bumper, simply because to me, I didn't put enough metal in it to make it strong enough to do that. So this bumper is mounted using the factory tow point locations, recovery point, tow hooks, whatever you want to call them. So the piece that runs underneath, you can see here, is where the main bumper mounts. And then I did a side drill through the frame rails to kind of give it some lateral stability. So this bumper mounts into the factory tow points under here, recovery points, I'm sorry. And I bought these little kind of chintzy aftermarket recovery hooks, and these basically sandwich the bumper up against the frame here. So these mount right in there, and they squeeze the bumper in tight. And then that sideways hole, I run a bolt. I run one of these long bolts through the frame with these large fender washers on each side of it. And that holds it plenty stable, because the bolts and the hooks are really the strength of the recovery points, not the bumper itself. It doesn't need to have that hard of a mount. But that was really the only way I could figure out how to get kind of a high clearance front bumper. Good approach angles, really leaving the front of the tires wide open. Now, the caveat was that I had to remove the factory washer reservoir, which normally sits right here in this section, but I had to do that anyway for larger tires. And I also had to cut quite a number of hang down hooks and stuff. I believe, I can't remember where I trimmed, but there used to be a fender thing hanging down here, and I cut that off. You can see I cut, normally this is square here, goes down like this, and I just followed the tried to make it look as factory as possible and cut this core radiator mount here to kind of have some clearance so you wouldn't see this hanging down behind the bumper. And then obviously I cut the frame rails off. Normally, wish I had them still, I'd show you, but normally these stick out here and they have 4 bolts that the bumper mounts to on the front. So I cut these way back here so that the front of the bumper actually sits flush with the front of the vehicle now. And it seems to work out fine. The only thing I don't particularly like about it right now is that because normally the big aftermarket bumpers kind of run down under here, they protect the bottom of the radiator very well, and this bumper did not have that. So what I did was I figured that out right before I was going on a trip. I quickly built this makeshift skid plate on the bottom here. There was scrap that I had left over, and that rides right underneath the radiator. And I'm not super confident in it. It gives me a warning that I'm whacking into something, and then I have to pick a different line. What I'll probably eventually do is run a piece of like 1x4 square tubing in this thing's place, so that at least has, if I whack it, it'll at least not bend up into the radiator. It might dent the square tubing, but it should be strong enough. The main issue is that this gets welded right near those mounting points, so I don't have a ton of room under there. And this whole thing was made out of leftover scrap metal and stuff. I made it in like a weekend. It wasn't a big project. It was the first bumper I ever made, and or first plate bumper, I should say. So it was sort of cardboard and strings, but it turned out pretty good. I don't hate it. If I redid it again, I would change a few things, but it serves its purpose. And these lights are just some non-expensive Amazon ones. I think they were like 20 bucks for all 4. And what I did is because they draw so much less because they're LED, I just spliced them together and wired them into a factory fog light hookup, so that 2 run on each side together, and those plug into the factory fog light harnesses. And so I can actually control those with the factory switch on the steering wheel. So I didn't have to wire any new switches or anything like that. So today I'm working on, because I trimmed my fenders back, the back of the bumper line is not going to line up anymore with the fender. So I'm going to mount it up and see how much of the edge of the bumper I need to take off and get it lined up. Alright, so I have the bumper somewhat mounted up so I can see. So you can see here that now my fender and the edge of my bumper don't line up anymore because of the trimming I did for the 35s. So I'm just going to follow this line down to about here. Put a little more angle on it. And then this will go this way. And this will go this way. I'm going to give it a little bit of extra clearance because I may end up with a kit that moves the wheel 1 inch further forward. All right. So we've got the bumper mounted back on. Follows that edge a lot better now. And just to get a visual on the mounts, they are, here's my tow hooks, bolt through the bottom of the mount, sandwich the plate against the frame, and then I use this through bolt basically just to keep it from bending these if it gets pulled on too hard. But you can see that the bumper barely sticks out past the front of the truck compared to how most of the front bumpers sit. And it sits up real high since the frame rails are right here and the base is up here. But like I said, this is the only place it bothers me. Like, I have this skid plate built in here under the radiator, but I don't know. If I took a really hard hit, there's only about, I don't know, a quarter inch between the bottom of the skid plate and the radiator. And then obviously something could come through this way. It just would be kind of difficult. A stick or something, I guess, could make it. I may end up putting some expanded steel or something, mesh between these 2 points, something that won't visually make it too clunky, but will protect it from sticks and whatnot. All right, that's pretty much it.